I'm someone who looks at someone's health and tries to improve it through nutrition, so through food and supplementation. But they come to me for all different reasons. So they might come to me with asthma, eczema, any different sort of thing that's presenting, and then I basically look at the whole body, maybe their background and what they've inherited from their parents, and where they've come from as a child, and how many antibiotics they've had, everything you can possibly do, put it together in a big picture, and then give them a diet to go home with that's going to support any organs that are under-functioning, and maybe fine-tune with vitamins. And they come back, and then we see how that's gone, and maybe fine-tune it again, or maybe something else has come up. It can be like sort of an onion, so you do one layer at a time. Coeliac disease is an autoimmune disease. It occurs in people who are sensitive to wheat, and there's an autoimmune reaction that happens in the stomach, and unfortunately the villi which line the intestine, the small intestine, become damaged, and that means they can't absorb their nutrients effectively. There are many symptoms that for this disease, for coeliac disease. Predominantly it would be a bloated stomach, gas, diarrhea. Perhaps you might find in a child that they're not growing properly. They may have a distended stomach. Then later on in life you might pick it up later if you haven't early on. It could be a deficiency, for example, in iron, so you have anemia, or it might be osteoporosis where you have a deficiency in calcium. Because what happens in coeliac disease is that you can't absorb the nutrients from the food you're eating. So in the long run you put yourself at risk to diseases such as osteoporosis and anemia. If you think you're suffering from coeliac disease, you need to see your GP, and the GP will give you a test. That test will be usually a biopsy if he thinks it's necessary, and that will look at the intestine of the gut and see if it's been damaged by the gluten. He might also give you a blood test, and in that blood serum test he will see whether you have any antibodies. Because in people suffering from coeliac disease, the body sets up an autoimmune response to gluten, and so you get antibodies being produced by the body. Someone might come to me with a wheat intolerance if they have symptoms such as diarrhea, bloated stomach, abdominal pain. They might have wind or cramping in the abdominal region, and they might come to me because I would be able to give them advice as to how to remove this pain and discomfort. It's very simple for celiacs. The gut will heal very quickly if you avoid gluten. Somebody with coeliac disease might want to see a nutritionist because they'd help advise them where to find the foods that don't contain gluten and how to substitute wheat. For example, if they've been having a diet that's high in wheat, they'll be able to come to a nutritionist and they'll be able to help find other foods to substitute. The products to avoid that contain gluten are it's basically wheat. Wheat has a huge amount of gluten in, but also rye and barley, and most people have to avoid oats as well if they are celiac. They're the main grains, but you need to be quite careful because whilst just avoiding those grains, there are a lot of products in supermarkets that contain wheat, and they can be quite hidden. You can, for example, find it in some toothpaste, and so you have to be very careful about what you buy. The grains that don't have gluten are rice, millet, corn, maize. Potato is not a grain, but potato is another form of carbohydrate, and also buckwheat, polenta, soya and millet. They're very good alternatives to grains that contain gluten. You're not at all condemned to a boring diet if you're a celiac. These days it's easier than ever to be able to find different foods that substitute what would normally be wheat with other grains that do not contain gluten. So you can find that, for example, there are some very good sausages that are made that are wheat-free and gluten-free sausages. And 10 years ago they simply weren't on the market, but these days it's much easier to be able to find products that are gluten-free. I've always been interested in celiac disease because my own son, when he was a small child, he had a distended stomach, he was bloated, and his arms and legs actually were quite small, and I wondered what was wrong with him. I took him to my GP and he said, try avoiding wheat and dairy, and I couldn't believe the difference in my child. He suddenly became much more energized, and so it was a natural beginning for me to actually study nutrition. With my, the illness of my own son led me basically to study nutrition. And I spent a long time looking through the supermarkets, checking there was no wheat and gluten in the products that I was buying. Yes, I think it would be fantastic if supermarkets did even more. They have already improved, and I'm sure there will be more and more things on the market, and with different recipe ideas, for example, that would be helpful, and a wider range of products would be great.